We've reached the second chapter of this free Luminar NEO course. Welcome. If in the previous chapter we introduced the program and went over everything related to the image catalog, presets, and explored Luminar NEO's basic development tools, in this chapter we're going to dive right into the program's editing tab, where all, or almost all, of the magic happens. We're going to cover everything from the raw development tools in detail to professional tools and Luminar NEO's creative tools, the ones that let us achieve exactly the atmosphere we want in our images. If you skipped the previous chapter and would like to check it out first, I'll leave the link here for you. I'd like to remind you that you can find this course completely free, both on this YouTube channel, Natural Portraits, and at the Natural Portraits Academy. But if you sign up for the course at the Academy, you'll also get access to extra content, such as full editing sessions and updates about this software as they become available. If you still don't have your Luminar NEO license, go to the link in the description of this chapter and don't forget to use the code NATURAL to get a €10 discount. Remember that Luminar NEO is licensed software, not a subscription. You pay only once and can use it as long as you want until you decide to upgrade to any new versions of the software that may come out. And with that said, let's go to the computer and dive right into the editing section of Luminar NEO. Alright, here we are again in Luminar NEO for this second episode of the free Luminar NEO course that you're enjoying both on the Natural Portraits YouTube channel and at Academia Natural Portraits. In the previous chapter, we already covered everything related to the catalog, which is the tab we're currently in, where we have all the tools that allow us to navigate through our photo catalog. Here on the right side, we have all the generative tools. We'll take a closer look at these in the next episode of this course. And over here, in the favorite section, I have a small selection of photos that I've chosen to dive into within the editing tab, which is what we're going to cover in this episode of the course. The editing tab is conveniently located at the top of the screen, where we have the catalog, presets, and editing. If we select any of these photos and enter this tab, we have access to the entire catalog of editing tools in Luminar NEO. In other words, these are the tools that will allow us to develop our photos, just like with any other photo editor on the market. The big difference, as you'll see, is that Luminar NEO offers a ton of AI-powered tools that let us develop our photos incredibly quickly, efficiently, and with just a few clicks. Before we dive deep into all the tools we have here, let's take a look at how they're organized. As you can see, here we have Tools and Edits. From here, we can access the entire history of adjustments we've made to the photo. And from here, under Tools, we have access to the different tools that Luminar NEO offers us. Right below, we have the layer properties. From here, we have the option to work with Luminar NEO's layers. We already covered this in the previous chapter, where we saw a bit about how layers work in Luminar NEO, so we won't go into detail about it now. But just as a reminder, everything related to layers is here. There's also the crop tool, which lets us correct any tilt in the horizon or crop our photo. In fact, here we can see that the horizon isn't perfectly level, so we can click on auto alignment, which, as we see in this case, doesn't work perfectly because there's only a small portion of the horizon visible, but we can adjust it however we want from here, using the guides to level it exactly to our liking. As you can see, now the horizon is perfectly level, so we click apply. Next, we have the tools themselves. As you can see, the tools in the Luminar NEO Edit tab are organized into sections, which really helps us find exactly the tool we need in each case. On one hand, we have the favorite tools, where we have Enhance and the tools related to the sky. Then we have the tools related to image quality. In this case, we have two AI-powered tools that work really well. One is for controlling the noise in the photo. We'll see how it works in a moment, but from here we can manage the noise in the image. And here we have the Super Sharp tool, a feature that allows us to achieve spectacular sharpness and definition in our photos. Next, we have the Essential tools. The Essential tools are the raw development tools. These are the kinds of tools you might find in other photo editors. For example, we have the Develop tool. As you can see, this is a raw development tool that allows us to adjust the photo's profile, exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, and so on. We have the Erase tool. From here, we have the option to selectively erase certain things. Now let's see how it works. structure, color, black and white for black and white development, details, noise reduction, vignette, and so on. Next, we have the landscape tools. These are tools specially selected for landscape photo editing, where we have sun rays, light enhancement, atmosphere, and water enhancement. Creative tools. These tools are very powerful, as we will see, since they allow us to give a strong artistic and creative touch to our images, usually as final adjustments to our edits. And next we have the portrait tools. These tools, although they can be used for any photo editing, are specially selected for portrait photography. And finally, we have the professional tools, the super contrast tool, which will allow us to control the contrast of the photo very, very effectively. Color harmony, dodge and burn, clone, and so on. Alright, so we have this photo open. Let's go back to the very beginning and start with the essential tools, the raw development tools. As you can see, here we have a very dark photo. This photo was captured this way to preserve the highlights we have here, because there is a very strong backlight and therefore it's a very dark image. So this is a direct adjustment within raw development. Here in the development tool, we have the option to raise the shadows and recover all that information that was hidden in the shadows of the photo. We can also control the highlights a bit so they don't blow out too much, and in this way we already have this initial starting point to begin working on this image. Let's look at more things we can do from this section. For example, the lens. From here, we have the option to automatically correct distortions in the photo. For example, if we have a horizon that's too curved due to barrel distortion, which can be caused by a wide-angle lens, from here we have the option to correct it automatically, as you can see. We also have the option to automatically correct chromatic aberrations. This should mainly be visible here, in the brightest areas of the photo, although I have to say that the lens I used is a high-quality lens. And I don't think there are too many chromatic aberrations, but if there were, we could correct them from here, so that we don't get those blue and red halos that can appear when we have chromatic aberrations in our image. As you can see, from here we also have the option to manually correct any possible distortions, since Luminar NEO, unlike other software like Lightroom, which does include a lens catalog and automatically corrects distortions based on the lens profile, in Luminar NEO this doesn't work that way. We don't have that lens catalog. So we have to let Luminar analyze our photo and correct it automatically. And if it doesn't manage to correct it automatically, then from here we can finish correcting our image manually. As you can see, the program generally works very well. We have a leveled horizon, we have the lens distortion correctly applied, and with that we have this initial starting point. From here, we could work on color, for example, to give the image a bit more saturation, to add a bit more intensity, in short, to have a more striking and cheerful photograph. I encourage you to explore all the tools that this section of Luminar NEO offers you. As you can see, we can adjust the whites, we can adjust the blacks, and so on, etc. However, these are not the most powerful tools that Luminar NEO offers us in this section. We also have curves, sharpness. As you'll see, it's preferable to adjust these from other areas, where we have access to artificial intelligence to achieve even more powerful adjustments. But anyway, from here, as you can see, you have access to all of this. Noise reduction and so on. Let's close this tool, and with this starting point, let's see what else Luminar NEO offers us in these initial tools. For example, the favorite tools, from here, from the Enhance and Sky tools, we can achieve spectacular results in photos like this one. Let's start first with the Enhance tool. As you can see, here we only have two sliders, the Accent slider and the Sky Enhancement slider. With Accent, look at what we can achieve. We can bring out all those areas that were in shadow or that have a greater amount of shadow in a spectacular way while maintaining the brightness of the sky. As you can see, the level of brightness in the sky stays the same, but we can really enhance the shadow areas. In other words, with just one slider, we can balance our photo to have an evenly exposed image, correctly exposed in all its areas. Maybe in this case I went a bit too far, this is a matter of personal preference. But notice how we can enhance the entire photo overall. I would leave it more or less around here. And now let's move on to the Sky Enhancement. Sky Enhancement allows us to add contrast to the sky, giving us a more dramatic sky. a sky with deeper shadows and more pronounced colors. And notice how, with just these two adjustments, with these two sliders, the photo changes dramatically. In this case, we're talking about a photo that, as we saw earlier, look at where we started from. A completely dark photo, an underexposed photo, very dark, and look at what we have now. But it doesn't end here. Let's move on to one of the standout tools in Luminar NEO, which is the sky tool. In this case, we have a sky with some reddish clouds, but overall a rather dull sky. In general, what happens if we have a sky we don't like? We're traveling, visiting a place we know we probably won't visit again, or at least not for a long time. We're at an iconic location that we want to capture in a photo, but the sky isn't cooperating. The sky isn't what we want for that iconic spot we're photographing. Well, with the AI-powered sky tool, we can apply a sky that matches the situation we'd like to photograph. Here we have a section that tells us for this photograph. In other words, Luminar NEO is analyzing our image and suggesting some dramatic skies that might work well for our photo. But from here, we also have the option to choose whichever sky we want, and even add our own skies from here. If at any point we've photographed a really striking sky, or we've seen an impressive sky and captured it in a photo, we can save those photos so that from here we can load them directly from the folder on our computer where we have them, and use them as skies for our images as well. Let's use one of the suggestions that Luminar NEO gives us, for example, this one here, which would be a pretty interesting sky to apply to a photo like this. Well, there we have our sky applied, but notice that the sky isn't perfectly blended with the landscape. So from here, let's finish adjusting it. From here, we have the option to apply a horizontal adjustment, vertical adjustment, and horizontal position. If I want to keep the position of the sun there, I'll move it roughly over here, which is where it seems to be. Where the sun is in that sky. Something like that could work. Now let's refine the sky mask from here. We can perfectly adjust that mask and notice how the sky starts to blend seamlessly into our photograph. Like this, more or less, we already have the sky merged with our image. Here, we could maybe tweak it a bit more, and in this way, the sky would be practically blended into the spot where we want it. The position of the sun is still subtly marked there. Now, we're going to finish fixing it, but let's move on to another important aspect, which is relighting the photograph. We're going to make the rest of the image relight with the sky we've just added, and from here, we have the ability to do that. Notice how from here we can make the entire photograph relight. With the sky we just added, we can saturate that relighting with the colors from the sky. Notice how, on these little salt mountains we have here, the sky is reflected. But not only that, notice that here we have a section with a reflection. From here, we can make the water show movement. Notice how we managed to make the reflections in the water softer, and from here we can achieve a stronger reflection in the water. Look how powerful this is. And finally, we have the option to finish making adjustments to the sky itself. From here, in the sky adjustments, we can blur it. This would only be if we were interested in doing so. In this case, it's a landscape photograph and we're not interested, but imagine a portrait photo where we've placed a sky like this in the background and want to apply a bokeh effect to the image with that blurred sky. We can add grain to it. We can add atmosphere, and then we can work on the warmth and brightness of the sky. Notice how the photograph has changed from what we had initially to what we have now. As you can see, we've only applied a few clicks to our image, but we can still perfect it even more. As we've seen all along, we had the sun positioned here, and in fact, part of the sun is still there. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish fixing that. How? By using one of the most powerful creative tools in Luminar NEO, which is the Sunrays tool. You can find this tool in the landscape section. As you can see, here we have sun rays. If we open this tool, the first thing we'll find is a button that says Place Sun Center. You simply need to move this little dot to where the sun is located in your image. There we have it, and here we increase the amount, and now we have our sun. Notice that we can move this to any area of the image. And one of the things that amazes me most about how this tool works is that it detects where you're placing the sun, and the sun rays slip through the gaps in the clouds, in this case behind the mountains. If I move this over here, notice how those beautiful sun rays gently slip in behind the mountain, casting a warm and inviting glow over the landscape. It constantly detects the subtle details in our photo to adapt and fine-tune the effects we're using. This sunray effect is truly really powerful. Alright, here we have our sun placed, and from here we can carefully control how far the sun rays will penetrate into the scene, how long these sun rays will be, how far they'll go in, and so on. From here, we can also control the radius of the solar disk, the radius of the glow from the mist the sun produces, and the amount of mist we want to have. And finally, the adjustment of the rays themselves. If we want more or fewer rays, and to randomize those rays. And finally, from here. From this section, where we can add warmth both to the sun and to the sun rays, we can finish adjusting, in this case, the tone of these sun rays, which could be, for example, a sunset sun, something like that. And in this way, we have the sun in the exact position where we originally had the sun, a sky that we've adjusted to match a situation in which we would have liked to take this photo, and an entire image adapted to that. And as you can see, with just a few clicks, we've edited this photo in this way, super quickly. Finally, what would I do to this image? Well, for example, I find it really strange to see this here. This little bit of foam here in the water, my eyes keep getting drawn to it all the time. So from here, from the Essentials section, we have the Erase tool, and it's as easy as doing this and telling it to erase, and that's it. This way, in my opinion, the photo would be fully edited. Remember, we started with this and now we have this. Alright, let's look at more things we can do with Luminar NEO. Let's go to this photo I have here, which is practically a snapshot. A high-key shot taken at the Uyuni Salt Flats in Bolivia. A truly impressive place where we can photograph scenes like these. Flamingos with their reflections in the water. And this reflection that forms between the sky and the salt flat itself. It really is a magical place. However, this photo has a problem. If we zoom in, we can see that it's not completely sharp. Why is that? Because it was captured with a 400mm telephoto lens on an APS-C sensor, which is equivalent to 600mm, and when we shoot at such a high focal length, we encounter these kinds of issues. There is a reverberation in the environment, which we can clearly see here in that completely blurred horizon. And it also affects the subjects we're photographing, in this case, these flamingos. We can fix this with Luminar NEO. We can achieve a sharper, more detailed image. So let's take a look. We go here to Edit, and in this case, we're going to use a tool that I really love for how it works, which is the Super Sharp tool. We go here to Super Sharp, and in this case, we're going to click on Low. Let's click and see what it does. Well, just look at the change in the photo. If we zoom in now, and this is just with the low setting of Super Sharp, look at the definition we have in this image, the definition of those flamingos. If we click on Before and After, we can see the huge difference, both in the flamingos and in their reflections. Likewise, in the background, we see that it's also much better defined. It's really a very significant and visible change in the photo. I'm going to undo it, and let's apply the medium setting to see the difference. Alright, here we have it. Let's zoom in. Well, from my point of view, the medium setting in this case is already too much. I see the image as too forced. We can see how it has added a lot of sharpness. If we look at the before and after, it really brings out a lot of sharpness. But in my opinion, for this image, the low setting is more than enough. In fact, I'm going to leave it as it was. So let's undo and apply the low setting, which is this one here. For me, this is a very subtle photo, a really beautiful image, and the only thing left to do would be to align the horizon, which in this case has been done perfectly with the automatic horizon alignment adjustment. There it is. And what I'm going to do now, from here, from the Essential Tools, is apply a bit of smart contrast, lower the shadows, and add a bit of vibrance. And look at how this photo has changed. We started with this and now we have this other version. It's a subtle change, as you can see, but if we zoom in, it becomes clearer. We started with this and now we have this other version. Honestly, the image was already good for me. I just needed that extra touch of sharpness and to finish applying those basic, simple adjustments I made. And now, this photo, which I find very beautiful, is ready to export and save. Alright, let's move on to another one of the images I captured at the Salar de Uyuni, which is this one here. From my point of view, it's a very interesting photo because it shows us this horizon right in the center with the reflection of these mountains, the sky mirrored on the salt flat, and these flamingos flying. However, this photo has a problem, and that's noise. Notice that the photo is fine, it's well defined, but it's a noisy image because it was taken at a time of day when it was practically already getting dark. It's a handheld shot, so to get this level of definition I had to raise the ISO sensitivity, and that's where these noise problems come from. Can we fix it with Luminar NEO and get a well-developed photo? Well, let's find out. We'll go to the edit section and start working, in this case within the essential section in raw development. From here, I'm going to increase it. The exposure, add a bit of contrast, lower the shadows a little, boost the saturation and vibrance, and well, now it's starting to get some color. However, we still have that noise problem. How can we fix it? Well, Luminar NEO has several tools designed for noise control. As you can see right here in the raw developer, we have the option to reduce noise. Here in noise reduction, we have options to reduce luminance noise and color noise. Here as well, in noise reduction, we have the possibility to access the same tool: luminance noise reduction and color noise reduction. These would be the tools. These are the traditional standard noise reduction tools that you would typically find in any other photo editor, whether it's a basic or advanced one. Notice that simply reducing the luminance noise, which is the grainy, speckled effect you often see in low-light photos, already gives us a much cleaner, smoother, and more visually appealing image. This could be one way to reduce noise in your photographs, and it's a method that many photographers rely on. However, Luminar NEO is especially well known for its advanced artificial intelligence tools, which set it apart from other editing software. Here, in this particular case, we have a specialized tool called Noiseless, which in this situation recommends using the low setting for this specific photo. So let's go ahead and apply it and see exactly what Luminar has done for us. This is what we started with, the original image, and now we have this, the result after applying the tool. It has applied a fairly gentle, subtle, and restrained noise reduction, in my opinion. But if you look at the image at a glance, it now looks super clean, with the beautiful reflection of the flamingos in the water, in this perfectly still mirror-like water. So, although we could apply a medium setting, in fact, let's undo and apply the medium setting now, there it is. And as you can see, it's a bit stronger, a bit more pronounced. This AI-powered noise reduction tool allows us to preserve the sharpness and detail of the photo above all else, while still effectively reducing noise. Notice how much sharpness and clarity we have in those flamingos, even after the noise reduction has been applied. What a beautiful, striking image. And the only thing left to do with this image would be to finish developing it, making any final adjustments or enhancements as needed before considering it complete. From here, in the color section, we can add a bit of saturation and a bit of vibrance. And with that, this photo would be saved and ready to export or share. Let me remind you, this is where we started, and this is what we've achieved. An incredible difference with just a few clicks. Alright, let's take a look at more tools available in the editing section of Luminar NEO with this photo. This here is the Cascada de los Tilos on the island of La Palma, an amazing place, a spectacular laurel forest, which gives us, as you can see, stunning photos like this one here, but that we can still improve even more with just a few clicks in Luminar NEO. Let's start editing this photo from the very beginning. Here we have a sky that's quite flat, a completely white sky. It was a cloudy day, so from here, in the develop section, we're going to lower the highlights a bit so that our eyes aren't drawn so much to that part of the photo. Something like this should be good. We've balanced it out a little. What else can we do to this image? Well, we can work a bit on the contrast. Although if we increase the contrast, that white in the sky will come back. But we can compensate for it again from here. This gives us a first starting point to keep working from. Let's continue working on the contrast of this image. For that, we go to the Professional Tools section, where we have the Super Contrast tool. Here we have Highlight Contrast, which lets us further affect that flatness in the sky. Notice how we can still tweak those highlights a bit more from here, but if you look closely, what happens is that it also affects the waterfall, and we don't want that. So let's apply a mask from here. Mask, Brush Mask, and we're going to select only that area of the sky where we want this adjustment to apply. There we go. Perfect. If we now want to further increase the contrast of the photograph in general, we can open the Super Contrast tool again, and in this case we'll be able to work on the entire photograph, not just on the mask. That is, we can apply the tools as many times as we want, with masks, without masks, and on successive occasions within the same editing session. As you just saw, I applied the Super Contrast tool only to the sky using a mask, and now I'm going to apply it to the whole image. Notice how from here we can work on the midtones, work on the shadows, and in this case, once again, work a little on the highlights. And see how, with this tool, we achieve a super interesting contrast in our image, going from a rather flat image to what we have now. Well, there are more things we can do with this image. Let's go to the Landscape section, and from here, in the Landscape tool, we have a slider called Foliage Enhancement. In this case, we have a lot of green in this photograph. From here, we can enhance it even more. I don't want to overdo it because the image is already very green. The island of La Palma is very green. But notice how we can enhance the green of this forest. Let's move on to another tool. One of the powerful features recently added to Luminar NEO, which is depth relighting. Is this one we have here in the Creative Tools section. If we raise the amount slider from here, watch what happens. Luminar NEO is capable of analyzing our entire image in 3D, and in this way we can relight or adjust the lighting by depth in our image. We can direct that lighting exactly where we want it. For example, if I want to light up this area here where the waterfall is, to maintain the contrast we have over here, I can direct the lighting to that part. And as you can see, it respects the sky and doesn't affect it. When I add light, notice where the illumination is being applied. I can also soften the adjustment. And honestly, what this allows us to do is just incredible. Look at how I can light up exactly where I want. Behind these ferns, behind this rock here, right where the waterfall is falling, I can light up exactly that area. From here, in the advanced settings, we can affect the rest of the photo. For example, I can also light up the foreground, the closest part, to balance things out just a little bit more, and then I can also carefully adjust the warmth or coolness of each individual area. For example, if I want the closest part to be a bit cooler and the background to be slightly warmer, I can easily do that from here as well. This photo really lends itself to adding some atmosphere, so let's go ahead and add a bit of fog to enhance the mood. And notice how the program precisely and perfectly detects where to apply that subtle fog and where to add that gentle atmosphere for us. In that middle ground we have between the foreground and the background where the waterfall is, we can apply that fog to give the photo such an interesting atmosphere. But from here, we can also control the depth we want that fog to have. And of course the amount of fog, the level of illumination of that fog. This would be the fog tool, but we can also apply fog in layers. For example, here in this area, or in this foreground, we could apply layered fog only in this specific area. A more generalized fog. Ultimately, we have the ability to perfectly adjust the atmosphere of our image, which in the end is what gives us the final result, what makes a good photograph become an exceptional one. And to wrap up this episode, I've saved a couple of photos that I'm going to process from start to finish, just as I would normally edit these images. One of them is this one right here. This photo was taken at the El Tatio Geysers in the Atacama Desert in Chile. It's an amazing place, a place where we have formations like these here, which look like small volcanoes. They are geysers, where water and steam come out and where we can capture images like this one. Let's go to editing and see what I would do to this photo. Well, first of all, I would go to the develop module, and from there I'd adjust the image levels a bit. I'd lower the highlights. Those highlights are really strong. I'd raise the shadows a little, just a bit. I like the darkness in the foreground of the image. The image is very blue, the sky there was very blue, it was amazing how blue it was. It's a very high altitude area. I would bring it a little more towards a slightly warmer tone and maybe adjust the color intensity a bit. Next, I would work on the sharpness of the foreground. Let's see how I do this. From here, in the detail section, we can enhance the small details, the medium details, and the large details, as well as the overall sharpness of the entire photo. Notice that if we increase this and zoom in, we'll see it better. By increasing this, the image gains a very interesting sharpness. It's subtle, it's a subtle change, but it's noticeable. There it is. I apply that sharpness adjustment, and now let's move on to the rest of the details. I close the tool, open it again, and I can apply it once more, but in this case I'm going to use a mask. A linear gradient mask. I want to affect only this foreground here. So I apply the mask, go back to the adjustment, zoom in, and we're going to work on the small and medium details. There it is. Notice how we get that sharpness, that focus, but only in the foreground. Now we have this foreground in focus, and we don't touch the rest of the photo. We want the viewer's eye to move from this mini volcano here to this other one over here, and then to the sun. So how are we going to enhance that sun? By going to the sun rays tool. The sun rays tool lets us place the sun here and really boost it a lot. Notice how the sun adapts to the landscape. In this case, it detects that the sun is coming in from there and lets us enhance it very well. Let's adjust those sun rays, let's adjust the diameter, the radius of the sun, the radius of that glow the sun has, the number of rays. What I'm going to do is add warmth to that sun, give a bit of warmth to those rays. There we go, that's it. Another spectacular adjustment that Luminar NEO offers, powered by artificial intelligence, is the Magic Light tool. You can find this adjustment in the Creative Tools section. And how does it work? Well, we need to increase the intensity a bit, and then this pointer appears here. If Luminar NEO detects the exact light point in our photo, it will mark it for us. If not, we have to mark it manually ourselves. With this pointer, we select the light point, which is this one right here, and from there we can finish adjusting that magic light. Notice how it creates that burst effect we love so much in photos. In this case, it's already caused by the sun itself, also by the sun rays we've added, but here it's an extra effect we can apply. See how it's an extra we can add, and it looks really good with this mount we have here, this geyser. Let's remove the rays, because here we can also add sun rays. This effect works really well, for example, to achieve that sunstar effect when we want it on the sun, but in this case I don't want it, so I'm going to remove the sun rays. I would leave it like this. See, there we have it. Alright, more things we can do with this photo. I'm going to adjust the contrast of the image using the Super Contrast tool. I'm going to lower the intensity of those highlights a bit. Notice that even after applying those effects, from here I can reduce that strong glare while keeping the effect of those lights that were applied. In this interesting way, we can also work a bit on the midtones. See how we lower the overall level of the photo, but at the same time I'm going to lift the shadows a little, and we get this really cool contrast in the photo. Next, I'm going to work on the highlights and shadows of the foreground and background. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to go to the Lighting Depth tool. Raise it up just a little bit and let it carefully analyze the image for us. There we go. Then we're going to relight this photo a bit, making some subtle adjustments. I'm going to bring the light point over here, to this foreground, to give prominence to this volcano we have here, this little volcano of ours. Good, let's widen it a bit more like this, and I can give prominence to this little volcano here so that the viewer's gaze comes here, looks at this, then moves here, takes in all of this, and finally goes to that sunrise. From my point of view, I think this photo is missing a bit of color. So I'll come here to the essentials, to color. I'm going to increase the saturation a bit more. And from here, in the HSL section, I can work on the selective saturation of colors. Notice that this volcano in the foreground has some greenish tones that I want to saturate, and some orange tones that I also want to enhance. And there we have that adjustment applied. I want this foreground to have even more structure. Notice that the image is sharp, it has structure, but I want it to have even more presence, more structure. So I'm going to use the AI structure tool, which we have here in the essentials. I'm going to increase the amount a little bit. Notice how it gains structure, but I don't want it to affect the background. So I'm also going to apply a mask. A gradient mask, and I want that structure to only affect this foreground. There we have it. Notice how the structure of the foreground is enhanced, how it gets a super interesting 3D effect. And finally, I'm going to finish adjusting the overall atmosphere of the image. Let's try two things. Let's try the atmosphere tool and see what it does. Well, that's very interesting. The fog tool. Look how interesting it is. How it enhances that fog we have back there. I love the effect it gives us, so let's enhance the fog that way. I'm going to lower the brightness a bit and we'll enhance the fog like that. And we're also going to go to the creative tools, to the mystical tool, and look at what we achieve. That bucolic effect, that Orton effect, that effect we love so much in our images. Notice how it loses sharpness here in the background. Everything turns into a much more interesting atmosphere. And for me, this photo would now be fully developed in Luminar NEO. If we remember where we started, we came from this, and now we're here. Look at that change, and see how we've achieved the effect we wanted. Guiding the viewer from this foreground all the way to the background, and a photo with a spectacular development in just a few clicks. Let's move on to one last image, which is this one here, a nighttime photo taken at the Fuente Caliente lighthouse on the island of La Palma. It's a complex image, but with Luminar NEO, we can also do some things. It's complex because, look, this yellow light we had here in the foreground was caused by some street lights in this location. Alright, let's see what we can do with this image. Again, we come here to the development panel and let's start working on it. This image has some pretty strong highlights in the lighthouse. I'm going to try to tone them down a bit and then we'll enhance the lighthouse light again. I'm going to increase the exposure a little to get more detail in that Milky Way. As for the color, let's see what we can do. If we go to the color section, here, within the HSL section, which stands for hue, saturation and luminance, we can gently desaturate the yellows and oranges. And notice how, in this way, without touching the background at all, we've managed to remove that ugly yellow tint the lighthouse had because of those street lights we had in this place. Also, from here we have the lighting section, where we can even adjust the brightness level of those colors. And in this way, we can fix problems like this. Problems where we had streetlights casting a really ugly tone on this lighthouse. And we can adjust and fix it this way. Alright, this way we would have that orange color of the lighthouse adjusted. Let's enhance the light from the lighthouse. And how can we do this? Well, let's try to do it once again with the sun rays tool. If I position the center of the sun here on the lighthouse, let's increase the amount. Alright, so now we have that effect. Let's try to adjust it so it doesn't look so artificial. We adjust the length of the sun rays, in this case, the rays from the lighthouse. Let's lower the sun's radius and adjust the number of rays so that it matches the lighthouse's own beam. There it is. What else is happening here? Well, these rays go in all directions, they go up and down. We can adjust this, we can do it with a mask. So let's add a gradient mask so that the sun rays only go upward and don't affect the lower part. Exactly the same as what happens with the natural rays from the lighthouse itself. Something like that. And these rays, well, we can even adjust their color. Notice that the natural sun rays from the lighthouse are blue, so let's do the same. Let's go from here, from the warmth of the rays, and shift them toward blue. Alright, can we adjust that background with the Milky Way? Well, let's give it a try. From the Favorites tool in Enhance, let's try to adjust that sky. First, let's add contrast with the sky enhancement. Notice that we've already gained some contrast there. The photo overall looks a bit too purple, so from here, using color, temperature and tint, let's try to adjust it. These sliders are a bit tricky to use because as soon as you touch them, the image can turn a horrible color. But if you move both at the same time and are a bit careful, you can bring the tone of the image to a pretty neutral, natural look, like right now. Notice that we've achieved a much more natural tone in this case. Now, to finish up the photo editing, because it's pretty much done, I think a tool that would work really well is the brightness adjustment. Notice how, in this type of photo, it looks really interesting. You have to be a bit careful, because if you overdo it, it looks too artificial, but notice how it brings out all the highlights in the image, giving us a very interesting contrast. Let's see how the different adjustments look. This glow, this brightness adjustment looks much more natural. If we want to enhance the color of the Milky Way a bit more, we can do it from the color section using a mask, a luminosity mask, and this way, notice how, thank you. We can very precisely target exactly where we want the color adjustment to be applied. It's a luminosity mask, which means it selects the highlights, the bright areas of our image. So from here, we can adjust the exact area. For example, let's exclude all the light from the lighthouse, let's leave out the rest, and there we would have the Milky Way and part of the lighthouse, but mainly the Milky Way selected. Now we move on to the adjustment. And from here, we can increase the intensity, boost the saturation, for example, saturate the oranges, saturate the yellows, which are very present in the core of the Milky Way, and lower the saturation of the blues a bit. In short, we started with this image and now we have this other one. I encourage you to explore and investigate the entire editing section of Luminar NEO because as you can see, there are so many tools. We can't cover all of them in a single episode, otherwise it would be way too long. In fact, this episode has already gotten quite lengthy, but we can't go into each one individually. We will, however, continue to complement this course with new, complete edits of specific types of photos. For example, portrait photos, landscape photos, night photos. We'll keep adding to it. Still, I encourage you to explore all these tools and see how they work, because as you can see, with just a few clicks, the results are amazing. So with that, we wrap up this second chapter of this free Luminar NEO course, which you can enjoy on the Natural Portraits YouTube channel and within the Natural Portraits Academy. Also, let me remind you that within the Natural Portraits Academy, exclusive extra content will be published for students of the course. If after watching this second episode you've decided that Luminar NEO is the software you need for your photo editing, remember that by using the code NATURAL you'll get a €10 discount on any of the plans. Don't miss out. And with that, I say goodbye. See you again in the next episode of this Luminar NEO course.